All right, so here we are, episode 5. Michael is on hiatus, so you don't get the usual very cool intro that he does. May and I don't feel up to it. So we're going to wait till he comes back. But we have a special guest today, Yeltsin, who is May's significant other and an artist as well. And so he's going to help us out today. So who should go first? I think May should go first today. I feel like it's been a while. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Why don't you start with your artist?
Okay, cool. So my fact is about James Turrell. His work, Acton, is a very popular exhibit at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. It consists of a room that appears to have a blank canvas on display, but the canvas is actually a rectangular hole in the wall lit to look otherwise. So security guards are known to come up to unsuspecting visitors to say, touch it, touch it. And so this is my fact, which is kind of broad. It's more so about the piece itself. But I think what's really cool about James Turrell's work is that he tries to embody light in every single piece that he creates. And this piece specifically, the whole fact is circulating around the fact that viewers come in and see it and they think it's like a canvas up on the wall. They don't know how to address it. It's very simplistic in the sense that it's just like a flat color shape on the wall. But then with the guide of the security guards, the viewer will come closer and maybe go ahead and take their advice of trying to touch it. And when they try to touch it, their hand passes through this window, this like empty space in the wall. And so what it does to the viewers has them start to think about their, how they can be very small in this world, and that your perception is not quite what you think it is until you become a little bit more entangled with it, in the sense of like trying to touch something, but it's not actually tangibly there. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting piece of his.
I realized I did get to see or experience one of his pieces at LACMA a few years ago. He had that thing that looked like a giant MRI machine, the rainfall, I think, and then they put you in there and they have the person all dressed in like a white lab coat and everything, and then you just lie there for I forget how long it is, like 5-10 minutes or something, but it feels like it's forever in there.
Oh,
did you guys get to see that or experience that?
One that I've experienced was the sort of spaces. I think like the sort of cut holes in the ceilings, those sort of installations. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in the museum. I think I was there to see a different show, and then when I saw that piece was also on exhibition, I had gone up and I wanted to experience it, but there was like a reservation system, and so you had to reserve time to go in, and it was booked for the day and so on. But I did experience a different piece of his randomly in Las Vegas, and I'll send you pictures, Stephanie, if you want to include it in the recording.
Definitely.
But it's so funny because it's such a random space that they gave him in like a mall. It's really weird. It's just like this empty room that seems to be like a hallway leading to a custodial closet or something. And he had his LED lights kind of framing certain windows. But if you didn't walk past it, you would have never known that it was really there. But it does emit the kind of atmosphere that he gives off in his pieces, where it's all about standing in the space and being a part of this lit room in a certain atmosphere and tone and vibe, and you're supposed to stand there for a while. And that's something that I was reading about with a lot of curators and artists in general that just talk about his work, is that you have to physically be there to experience the work. You can't just view it on a screen or look it up in a book. It's something that you have to physically be present for.
Yeah, I can imagine. It'd be very underwhelming, experience just like looking at it, like the image that you have behind you. So that is not Acton. That is some other piece, right?
I think so. I think this is a different piece, but it's similar to this effect of having, this space in the middle of a gallery that you're like, is this a painting or is it just like, what is this? And do I go into this space? Am I welcome in here? If not, then I'm just going to pass by because I don't know, there's no label or anything. Yeah.
So Yeltsin, what do you have to say about James Turrell?
So one thing that really interested me was that James Turrell uses certain things, maybe technologies and different styles of architecture to kind of use land as a piece. And most recently, I think the Rodin crater, which is this like dormant volcano, is his latest work. So one thing that I found about it was the Eastern portal acts as a sort of camera obscura, which is that sort of like pinhole camera that sort of flips the image. And it's supposed to, I believe, project that sort of image of the moon every 18.16 years or something like that. This is pretty interesting. I don't know. I love astronomy and those sort of things. So that was just something that really stood out to me about this piece. But also the fact that it's in a volcano, that's also pretty interesting too.
Oh yeah, I think but again, it is kind of working with his theme of working with light and perception and all that kind of stuff. So I was really interested to find out that he actually grew up in Southern California and went to UCI as well. And I'm like, between him and Chris Burden, I'm like, okay, my estimation of UCI has really risen.
Right? Yeah.
Totally.
Because, having grown up in SoCal and just, being a little, I don't know, a little, how shall I say, dismissive of Irvine, as the cookie cutter kind of place. But there's rebels everywhere. And I did like the tidbit of him when he was 16, he got a pilot's license. He was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. So he flew Buddhist monks out of Chinese-controlled Tibet. And yeah, I'm like, wow, what? I mean, that is so awesome. Like,
I know, it's such a
badass.
random tidbit of his like artistic life. And I was reading more into him as well. And he apparently was, in his Quaker upbringing, he was also very against war. And so he had kind of like this, I don't know the word right now, but basically he would help people to avoid getting enlisted. And so he did this for a year, and then he actually got caught and spent a year in jail because of that. Wow. But in relation to what you were talking about with him being a pilot, part of the inspiration for this piece, Acton, was anytime he would fly over the town of Acton in California, there was this dense fog that covered the land, and it would alter his perception, and he wouldn't know which way is up or down, and it would develop this sense of disorientation. And so in the piece, the idea is also to create this sense of disorientation because you don't know if there's physically something on the wall or is it an empty space. You just don't know until you go up and try to touch it. And so also this idea of light and how there's light in all of us, like this Quaker mindset of there's the light in all of us. And so in spending a lot of time in church is something that he was also talking about. He would sit, and you're supposed to actually just be quiet amongst everyone and experience this practice within yourself, and only say something when you feel that you should do so. And so all of these little elements of his life kind of go into the reasoning behind his work.
That is really cool. And what you were saying about him flying in dense fog and everything reminded me of the whole thing that they were talking about, with Kobe Bryant's accident. Remember, that's kind of what happened to the pilot. he got disoriented, and then
Yeah.
so I think that's the first time I've ever heard of that phenomenon happening, where pilots can get disoriented to that extent. And
Mhm.
now that, I hear about this connection between, another pilot and what he experienced, and then he turned that into art, it is incredible. I don't know. It's just so neat.
Yeah. What do you remember your experience when you went into that piece at LACMA a few years ago?
Oh yeah, okay. So it really is like an MRI machine. Okay, not that I've been in an MRI machine, but this is what I imagine. You lie down, they slide you in, and you're just it's kind of like one of like the IMAX theater, right? It's like seamless because you're in this dome, and these colors like start like radiating and fading in and out. So from what I recall, there were no images. It was all just like lights, different colored lights, and there were subtle sounds, that went with it. Gosh, I wish I could remember more of it, but it was actually really relaxing. So like I think I
Nice.
kind of dozed off a little bit.
Oh, wow. How interesting. Wow.
You're just like being bathed in all this like light and colors, and and they were saying like how, okay, if you start to feel claustrophobic or whatever, you can like, I forget how you were supposed to let the operator know, but yeah, I can imagine some people might feel kind of weird in there, but I liked it. I thought it was very peaceful and interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like meditation, right? Because you're
Mm.
you're not trapped in a space, but you're asked to stay in a certain spot and just allow whatever visuals are happening to kind of enter your
Yeah.
vision. And yeah,
Right.
that's
And you're
cool.
just, yeah, you're being still. There's really nothing you can do. You're just supposed to lie there and just kind of let it all wash over you. And so it was a really neat experience. How did James Turrell come into your head for this episode? Like, what made you
Oh,
think about him?
well, there was that experience I had of his piece in Las Vegas, but I learned about him when taking some photography courses in school. And I don't know, just trying to come up with the next fact for the episode, I was thinking about artists that I wanted to research a little bit more and find out more about. But I think definitely with the whole pandemic, I've come to learn the benefits of meditation and finding beauty in light. And that's something that I work with, anyways, when it comes to photography and cyanotypes and so on. And so I knew that James Turrell did a lot of like these really beautiful, soft, light sculptures. In a sense, I guess you could say it like that. And yeah, I wanted to learn a little bit more about his work, and it's interesting reading about the feedback that he gets for his pieces and his reviews. And I was reading some articles about some younger people that had experienced the pieces, and they were saying like, oh, it's so trippy, or they would they would refer to it as like the black painting, or so it's like not quite something that younger I don't know, I don't want to say that younger people don't understand it on the same level as well, actually, yeah, I wouldn't say that at all, because it's all about just understanding who you are in a certain space, and having that space to spend some time. And all the photos that you see of people viewing his work, they all look so comfortable and are really asked to just kind of sit still for a certain period of time, where you're supposed to really view the work as it transitions from one color to another. So I would say that I'm kind of inspired by his work without actually really have experiencing much of it. I hope to.
Yeah. He's kind of one of the artists, like the more you find out about him, the more intrigued you get, because there's like so much idea behind the pieces,
Right.
a lot of depth. So yeah, no, I'm really intrigued too.
Oh,
And
good. I'm glad.
oh yeah, totally. And I think his work is beautiful and very thoughtful. All right. So Yeltsin, I want to find out about your person.
So the artist I chose was actually this, I'll say somewhat of a character, kind of this interesting I don't even know how to describe it, sort of artist. Does some interesting things. I have somewhat of a picture behind me of actually the first piece I've ever seen of this artist. So when I was in school, I took a video class, and there was a lot of different there was a lot of different sort of things that we kind of looked at, and one of them was this Jon Rafman character, and it's kind of like every piece that I saw was like really interesting, but this one was like just kind of monumental in a weird way. Um, and because it was this sort of like virtual space. It's like this thing called Second Life. I actually don't know anything about it, but it was this gigantic, I guess, multiplayer chat room video game. But he basically embodied this character, and went in there and sort of did this sort of virtual safari, but it mostly was sort of highlighting all of these sort of like interesting things that you find on the internet. So part of that was I have like a quote from an article. There was like this interview that there was, and it says, "Kool-Aid Man in Second Life brings attention to the rapidly changing world amongst technology. Inside that technology, it shows a self-fulfilling prophecy for seeking an aid to loneliness in a virtual world like Second Life. As social creatures, human players in these games often create communities built on artificial identities, and with the purpose of fulfilling, personal desires such as youth, and to express themselves in a way that is commonly rejected in everyday life." So to me, I don't know. To me, that kind of stands out as like people, have a desire to, yeah, I mean, not that people hate being themselves, but people online become a different person sometimes, and they have an opportunity to. And I think it's like a really interesting sort of way of thinking about how technology works. Although, I don't know, that's just the sort of piece behind me. The actual factoid was that there's a body of work that he does where he scours Google Earth and takes screenshots of just these images, and it's this sort of like really cold digital work that's just it's very utilitarian, but he picks out these very like I don't know how to describe them, like precarious images, like unattended children, um, people getting into fights, people just doing weird things, and it's this sort of like it's a camera strapped to the top of a vehicle, and it's this. There's no sort of like it's just indiscriminate of what it sees, and he sort of curates photography from that. I don't know. I think it's such a weird thing. Just a bit of background. From Canada. Studied, I think, philosophy, and then studied like digital media, videography, or something like that. But there is something that's kind of like elephant in the room if you look him up, which is this sort of thing that kind of like plagues the art world, I guess, and a lot of different things. It's really and it's really unfortunate to say, but it's this sort of like sexual misconduct, or sort of he, I guess, uses his or used his power to sort of abuse it in a different way. So I think it's something that's really unfortunate, and it's something that is also it's been brought up a lot in sort of different news outlets for art, for a lot of different art institutions and galleries and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So yeah, when I got to that part, I was kind of stunned, because up until then it was like, oh, how cute, Kool-Aid Man, and Second Life. Okay, this is hilarious because Second Life, they launched it like 20 years ago. So you guys were like 10, 5, I don't know. And like, I remember when it came out. And I remember friends like inviting me to join this thing. Oh, come into this thing. You get to make this avatar and you get to go around and do all this stuff. And so I was on it for maybe like a day. I was actually in this thing. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't get it. This seems like a big waste of time. I'm not really getting anything out of this. I'm out, you know? And at the time, the technology was such that, you know, the video was kind of jerky. It wasn't, you know, it was pretty lame. I don't know. And then afterwards you heard about all this stuff like, oh, corporations are getting in there, you know, like Pepsi or Coke is in there. They're making these malls where people can gather, and I don't know. And so when I saw that thing about Second Life, I'm like, is that still going on? Like, I honestly had no idea. If you told me that it was a sort of cult thing that like millennials and stuff were into, that, you know, I would have been like, yeah, okay, I guess that's possible. But I was stunned when I saw that, the thing about Second Life.
It's funny. I also only spent one day on Second Life in my younger teenage years because I wanted to try it out. It was circulating in the friend group. People were talking about it, and I was like, okay, I'll download it and I'll try it out. And all I remember was like, oh, my avatar could fly, and that was cool. And then I never signed back in. It didn't click with me, just like you, Steph. It was just like, I think in my world, it was just another video game that I just didn't, you know, if it didn't click with me right away, I wasn't interested. But what I think is really interesting that you note on as well, and Yeltsin had told me about this artist when he first learned about him in school, was how this whole new world, this whole new reality is becoming a really big part of our lives now in today's society. And one of the quotes that I found of Jon Rafman was that he writes, it's like we lose our ability to feel normal things if we live our lives on the internet, and we have to create progressively more extreme stimuli to get off it all. And I think it's so true, like as we move further and further into the future where, you know, social media is now so ingrained into society, and looking for the obscure within it is like little golden nuggets where people blow it up and turn it into memes and turn it into like, look at this Easter egg that I found on the internet, and, you know, all these weird things. And it seems like Jon Rafman like takes that and just like creates an entire world of it. Whether it be the Second Life tours as a Kool-Aid man or like the Nine Eyes project that he's doing. If you look through his Google Street like captured images, they're so interesting. And it's like, is this the reality that we're actually living in that we don't see because it's in a whole different part of the world, and I just, you know, I don't have access to drive by that one street? Or are they manipulated to make it seem like so? Because it really does seem like it's a whole nother internet reality that you're viewing it through a screen. So it is, you know, in a sense, another reality that could be concocted through an algorithm or what have you, or maybe an artist put it together. But I think his work is really interesting, where it makes you think about the totally obscure and just craziness of what the world could be.
So I did look at some more of his work. I did look through the Nine Eyes thing, and I'm like, is he actually just randomly looking at all these photos and just taking, you know, just cherry picking out the ones that he thinks are interesting? It's like, he has that kind of time? Like, I don't know. I wonder like what his process is like. He's like, 9 to 12, I'm on Google Maps, and I'm gonna look through all these images, and I'm gonna, you know, until I find one that I think is interesting, you know?
Yeah, no,
it's like, I'm just really interested in his artistic process. And I looked at some of his like video art, which I thought was really ugly. Like, like the typography and everything is so very, like, I don't know, like early web 90s kind of feel. And I guess that must be deliberate to a certain extent, but I just thought it was funny. I mean, it has like definitely it talks about the absurdity of our modern technological life. Which, yeah, if you think about it, is pretty crazy. Like, and how we got here just in such a short span of time, you know? And while things like Second Life didn't really take off, other things have in very surprising ways, like Instagram, like Snapchat, TikTok, all
Or
these
even
things.
kind of like what you were just noting on with in Second Life when you were hearing about corporations now entering this world. I remember Yeltsin actually had mentioned to me Minecraft. There were like events that were put on in Minecraft, and you show up to a certain location and then there's like a concert happening.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
I'd read an article on and on Roblox becoming just having a stock or going public or whatever, and they were valued at billions of dollars. And when I was reading that article, it was like the big thing that the reason why was that I guess the pandemic had perpetuated this the use of like this sort of like connecting online or connecting in some sort of way, and because it's free, um, every child could just get on this platform, and there's really no limits. There's no like no one checks anything. It's just you just need an email and a username, and it's like this whole it's a $1 billion organization. So I think it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it also goes to show you just how pervasive, capitalism is in our culture. Any little space that they can get in to influence or sell their stuff, they'll get in there, no matter what it is. And so I was trying to remember the interesting term that I read about Jon Rafman, like how his art is described. And it was Jon Rafman's oeuvre has been situated within the post-internet art movement. And I'm like, there was an internet art movement, because if we're post, then there had to have been like pre. And I was like, man, that just passed me right by.
Like he really embodies the internet movement, like present, not post. I don't know. I mean, I think that new genres and that being a whole thing where now we're creating artwork that merges the two worlds of reality and augmented reality, that might be more post-internet, but very much like going into Second Life and giving tours, like that is the epitome of the internet, in my opinion. Like, I don't know. That's like,
yeah, he's definitely still working within that structure. So post-internet to me is kind of like this whole craziness going on with the NFT stuff right now,
for sure.
And like when I was reading about, that one artist Cause, who has been doing these like AR sculptures and things like that, for a while, where it doesn't exist, but you can look at it, through your camera, through an app. And it's like, whoa, this is definitely post-internet, post-object. I mean, in a way, James Turrell's work is like a progenitor to that. So it's really fascinating to even like think about all this stuff that's going on that I don't even know anything about. I'm like,
sure,
wow, Jon Rafman is being taught in school. Wow, the internet barely existed when I was in school. So, it's like I feel very behind the times when I hear about people like this. But that's fine. That's how it is. It's like different generations are exposed to different things and different levels of things, whereas I do interact with the internet, pretty frequently. It's not even on the same level as like, let's say somebody in middle school or high school or college, so it's a really kind of bewildering feeling. And it keeps happening faster and faster because, imagine you're in college now, and like the things that kids are doing in middle school, I'm sure must seem very strange, to even a person in their 20s.
Sure.
And it's like, I just wonder, like, how much faster is the cycle gonna like go? I don't know.
True.
That's the kind of scary thing about the acceleration of technology.
And then along with the pandemic as well, having pushed us into the internet and, you know, forcing us to kind of be online and connect in this sense is also, in my opinion, very sad, because I don't want to live on the internet. I want to live in reality. And yet everything is like, if you don't exist on the internet, you don't exist in reality. So it's kind of
pretty much. And yet the flip side is, here we are.
Yeah, I guess so, right?
Oh, no. And without the pandemic, I don't know if this would have happened, honestly. But you know, we do want to meet in real life. We have met in real life. Like, we know we are like real beings and not just AI or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, anything more to say about Jon Rafman?
Rarely has reality needed so much to be imagined, off of his Instagram.
That's a great quote, I gotta say. I'm gonna take it back really old school here, where with someone who was very much all about the tangible object and the handmade materials. So yeah, my artist is Ruth Asawa, who is a Japanese American artist. I mean, she's Asian American. She was born here in Norwalk, California, and she was born into a farming family. And you know, as like a very like labor intensive thing that she had to do from an early age, there really was no time to, you know, devote to like the arts or anything like that. So it wasn't until she was incarcerated in one of the concentration camps that she came into contact with some other internees who used to be animators for Disney. And so she had artistic promise, which was never you know, acted upon until she was in the internment camp. And so she ended up learning from these guys who kind of, whoa, made her realize, maybe I could be an artist, maybe I could make art. So in a really weird way, this horrible thing that happened to her was also maybe the best thing that could have happened to her. So when I first saw her work at the De Young Museum in San Francisco, and I didn't know anything about her. She's not, you know, mentioned in art history classes or anything like that. But as soon as I saw her sculptures, I was so struck by their beauty, and just, you know, immediately you gravitate toward these objects. And so when I read a little bit about her in the museum placards, but I didn't really know that much more about her. And then now she's like, you know, she had her stamps, and, you know, now she's kind of getting more and more of that recognition. And so I've been learning a lot more about her, and like the more you learn about her, like the more incredible her life is, and like so inspiring. So when I found out about that, you know, that thing about her, the fact about her, and the being an internee, and maybe that setting her on the course to become an artist, it just really was amazing, and also like sad that that's what she had to go through. Yeah. So that's my introductory fact about Ruth. So I would like to hear what you guys kind of found out about her.
Well, going right off of that, I read in a few articles that she had said that she doesn't regret, you know, not that she had a choice necessarily, but she doesn't see it as a negative context in her life. Like she writes about how it shaped who she was, and quite literally could have been the catalyst to becoming an artist through that experience. And yeah, I felt that she was very inspirational as well. But what I was reading more about her, which kind of takes off into her later life, and when she founded the school in San Francisco, she started to create more of these sculptures that were a little bit more like handmade and piecing materials together to create castings and so on. And eventually she was coined the Fountain Lady in San Francisco, where she began designing unusual public fountains around the city. So I thought that was a really interesting spin, where she was creating these really beautiful wire sculptures pictured in your background stuff. And then she ends up into this fountain creation mode. But going back to those sculptures, what I found really beautiful in her inspiration for using the wire and using this aesthetic of them floating in this space is where she ties it back to her childhood, where she would create these shapes in the soil while she was tending to the farm with her family. And I thought it was a really beautiful connection that she made between, you know, her childhood and then moving through the experience of the internment camp, and then coming out with these works right as she began to get very serious about her practice.
Well, two things actually I thought were pretty interesting. One was that she learned the wire crocheting technique on a field trip in Mexico. So I guess the technique was similar to the sort of like basket weaving that they were doing there. And I looked a bit deeper into it, and it was this this interesting idea that this structure has form to it, but is sort of see-through. So this is sort of like liminality between that, and using line as a 3D sort of form, which I thought was just beautiful. I don't know. I really like materials, and if they're used in a very interesting way. So I found that really inspirational. I thought that was really cool. Although my second thing, kind of riffing off of that a tiny bit, let me see if I have it, but this is really awesome. So there's on the website, so like on her website, there's a recipe for clay, which you could make at home and bake in an oven. So I thought that was really cool. I guess it's some type of Play-Doh. I've never seen anything like that, but it looks like as if it's almost like plaster. And there's instructions on how to make it and how to keep it if you want to seal the outside. Awesome. I'm gonna totally try it out. Actually.
Ooh, yes, that would be really great. I really hope you do that. That's like your summer project.
Absolutely. I thought it was brilliant. Way cool.
Yeah, so you guys read about like how she ended up going to that Black Mountain College that was like super influential, very experimental, progressive school. One of the few that would accept Asian Americans at the time. I mean, you know, she experienced so much discrimination and hostility, but she was able to come through it with just this sort of matter-of-fact grace that is just, I don't know, so inspiring. But, you know, I think at the time she was probably just like, well, this is what I have to work with. You know, what am I going to do? You know, like, this is the system. I have to work with it. And but it's really interesting too, because she ends up bucking the system at so many turns, you know, like marrying a white man and having all these interracial children. Like, she had 6 kids. I can't even imagine what that would have been like with it was like a really cool photo of her like working on one of her wire forms with all of these kids around her, you know. Another inspiring thing about her is she had a long and happy marriage, you know, which we always talk about how like, oh my God, all these artists, they had like horrible unions, you know, no one was happy and all that. But, you know, she and Albert Lanier, you know, who she met at Black Mountain, they had a very long and fruitful union, which I thought was really great. You know, I'm really glad that at least she had a very good like personal life. And even if she didn't get the kind of recognition that she deserved while she was alive, you know, she had a good life. It's not like, you know, she had this like super depressing, horrible life where she had to spend 30 years in a mental institution or something like that. You know, she had a good life. So for that, I'm glad, because she produced so much great work and was able to, still have a nice normal life on top of it, which is like, it seems so unusual when you think about like great artists. But
yeah. Well, I think she really took her experiences and made them into inspiration rather than having them something that would dwell on her past and not motivating her to do anything. And she overcame all that, which is already inspirational in itself. But yeah, like you say, to go on and have a happy marriage and a fruitful family and all this is really quite fantastic. Something that I had learned about her before she enrolled in the Black Mountain College is that she briefly attended college in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and she had received like a, I don't know what it was necessarily, but there was a Quaker organization that called the Japanese American Student Relocation Council had given her a scholarship to attend college. So I thought there was a nice tie between the Quaker aspect with Ruth and with James Turrell in that sense, where, the Quaker lifestyle was to allow the potential to come through for each individual. And so I thought that there was a nice tie there, that there were people looking out for Ruth as well that wanted her to be able to reach her potential. So.
Yeah, so she was able to leave the internment camp early after high school graduation, but she had to go somewhere in the interior. She could not be anywhere on the coast. So she did go to this place and she wanted to be an art teacher. But then it turned out, as an Asian American, she was not allowed to get a teaching certificate. So it's kind of like, well, what was the point of all this?
Right. Yeah, it's just like keeping people in their perspective.
Well, people were just so afraid. It's kind of like after 9/11, people were so afraid of like Muslim people, and anybody who kind of smacked to the Middle East. It's just a total knee-jerk hindbrain kind of thing that humans are really good at. They just unfortunately, yeah. So the reason why I chose Ruth Asawa also was because I figured by the time this episode comes out, it'll be May, which is Asian American History Month. So obviously I'm kind of interested in that. So even though I'm not Japanese, I am wearing a shirt with the only kind of Asian character I have, which is Japanese, which hopefully, like according to Google Translate and some friends, it's supposed to say little kitten, but I hope that's what it is. I mean, at least I haven't committed this to like my body, like don't ever put foreign language tattoos on your body. You don't know. You never know.
Agreed.
So, like,
True.
I would never do that. But so when I first thought about like Asian American artists, I thought, well, she's the first person that came to my mind, also being female and, having overcome such incredible odds. She didn't come from a wealthy family, like Yayoi Kusama. She came from like probably the least art friendly background you could imagine, being like a farm worker. It's just astonishing to me that. And also I was thinking, like, what if she hadn't met those guys at the internment camp, those artists? I feel like she had enough of that artistic kernel within her that it would have expressed itself somehow, some way. Maybe it would have come out in a different way, maybe it would have come out later, but don't you kind of feel like, have you guys always had the artistic impulse since you were kids, like you just love drawing or that kind of stuff? So no matter what you end up doing, like that's always there with you, kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think if she hadn't gone through that experience, there would have been something else that would have been the catalyst to help her along that route. I don't doubt it.
I always feel like the creative outlet would have presented itself in some way, maybe not in to the scale. Maybe she would have lived in obscurity, never gotten shows or anything like that, but I feel like she would have the creativity would have manifested in some way, as it must.
Yeah, I think so.
Very true.